Madam President, today I'm introducing the Television Consumer Freedom Act of 2013. The legislation has three principal objectives. One, encourage the wholesale and retail unbundling of programming by distributors and programmers. In other words, allow the consumer, the television viewer who subscribes to cable, to have a la carte capability. In other words, not required to buy a whole bunch of channels that consumer may or may not consumer may not wish to subscribe to. In other words, a la carte. If you want to watch one television program, you can watch it. If you don't, you don't have to. The situation today obviously is far different from that. It would also establish consequences if broadcasters choose to downgrade their over-the-air service, and three, eliminate the sports blackout rule for events that are held in publicly financed stadiums. For over 15 years, I've supported giving consumers the ability to buy cable channels individually, which is known as a la carte, to provide consumers more control over viewing options in their home and, as a result, their monthly cable bill. The video industry, principally cable companies and satellite companies and the programmers that sell channels like NBC and Disney ABC, continue to give consumers two options when buying TV programming. First, to purchase a package of channels, whether you watch them all or not, or second, not purchase any cable programming at all. Two choices. You can either buy one of their packages or not watch it at all. That's unfair and wrong, especially when you consider how the regulatory deck is stacked in favor of industry against the American consumer. It's clear when one looks at how cable prices have gone up over the last 15 years, which is brought to light by the most recent Federal Communications Commission pricing survey. In the FCC survey, the average monthly price of expanded basic service for all communities surveyed increased 5.4% over 12 months ending January 1st, 2011, or to $54.46 compared to an increase of 1.6% in the Consumer Price Index. In other words, the cost of cable went up nearly 4 times the consumer prices that people pay for everything else. You can only do that when you have a monopoly. Over the last 15 years, this rise in cost has become even more evident. According to the FCC, the price of expanded basic cable has gone up at a compound average annual growth rate of 6.1% during the period of 1995 to 2011. This means the average annual cable price has gone up about $25 a month in 1995 to over $54 today. That is a 100% price increase. People are on fixed incomes. People are hurting. Why in the world should they have a 100% cost increase, and the only way it can be done is through monopolies? Those who provide video directly to consumers, like cable and satellite companies, are not solely to blame for the high prices consumers face today. Many articles have been written about the packages of channels, commonly called bundles, that are sold to cable and satellite companies by video programmers like Comcast, NBC, Time Warner, Viacom, and the Walt Disney Company, which owns 80% of ESPN. The worldwide leader in sports, as ESPN calls itself, thrives because of the advertising revenue it's able to generate and large subscriber fees. According to a January 2012 Newsweek article, ESPN charges $4.69 per household per month, citing a research company. By comparison, the next costliest national network, TNT, costs $1.16. Again, $4.69 for ESPN. The next expensive one is $1.16 for TNT. Whether you watch ESPN or not, and I do all the time, All cable subscribers are forced to absorb this cost. Not every American watches ESPN. Not every American should be forced to watch ESPN and pay $4.69 per household per month in order to have it carried into their homes when they don't view it. Because these channels are bundled into packages, all cable consumers, whether they watch sports or not, are paying for them anyway. Cable and satellite carriers that consider dropping ESPN must also contemplating losing other channels in the bundle, like the Disney Channel. Some have described this as, quote, a tax on every American household. Others, like the CEO of the American Cable Association, have said, quote, my next-door neighbor is 74, a widow. She says to me, quote, why do I have to get all that sports programming? She has no idea that in the course of a year, for just ESPN and ESPN2, she is sending a check to Disney for about $70. She would be apoplectic if she knew ultimately there's going to be a revolt over the cost, or policymakers will get involved because the cost of these things are so out of line with cost of living that someone's going to put up a stop sign. Today, we're putting up a stop sign, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out how powerful these companies are, as opposed to clearly correcting an injustice that's being inflicted on the American people. This legislation would eliminate regulatory barriers to a la carte by freeing up multi-channel video programming distributors, that's the cable and satellite companies, like cable, satellite, and others offering video services, to offer any video programming service on an a la carte basis. But if they want to keep bundling, they can do that too. They can make both offers to the American subscriber. In order to give these companies an incentive to offer programming on an a la carte basis, the legislation links the availability of the compulsory copyright license to the voluntary offering of a la carte service by the MVPD. In other words, if these companies don't offer a broadcast station and any other channels owned by the broadcaster on an a la carte basis, then that company cannot rely on the compulsory license to carry those broadcast stations. The compulsory license is a benefit conferred on these corporations. So it's reasonable to ask the recipients of that benefit to provide consumers with an a la carte option, and I emphasize an option. To address the notion that a la carte options are being denied distributors, the legislation conditions important regulatory benefits like network non-duplication, syndicated exclusivity, blackout rights, and retransmission consent option on the programs, allowing MVPDs to sell their channels on an a la carte basis. It's time that consumers got something in return other than a higher bill at the end of the month. Furthermore, because not all programmers also own broadcast stations, the bill contains a provision that would create a wholesale a la carte market by allowing programmers to bundle their services in a package only if they also offer these services for the MVPDs to purchase on an individual channel basis. If a cable operator doesn't want to carry channels like MTV, it would have the option of not doing so and only buying and carrying the channels it thinks its consumers want to watch. Finally, the bill provides if the parties cannot agree to the terms of a carriage agreement, the final offer made by each side must be disclosed to the FCC. Second section of the bill responds to statements by broadcast executives that they may, quote, downgrade the content of their over-the-air signals or pull them all together so that the program received by MVPD customers is preferable to that available over the air. Our country is facing a spectrum crunch, and if broadcasters who are using the public airways in return for meeting certain public interest obligations are going to deviate from those obligations, it is my view we should consider if that is the most efficient use of our country's spectrum. It would be a distortion of this basic social compact if over-the-air viewers were treated as second-class citizens. This bill provides a legislative response if broadcasters either downgrade their signal or pull it all together. The bill provides that a broadcaster will lose its spectrum allocation, and that spectrum will be auctioned by the FCC if the broadcaster does not provide the same content over the air as it provides through MVPDs. Finally, my bill touches on sports blackout rules that can limit the ability of subscribers to see sporting events when they take place in their local community but are not broadcast on a local station. When the venues in which these sporting events take place has been the beneficiary of taxpayer funding, it's unconscionable to deny those taxpayers who paid for it the ability to watch the games on television when they would otherwise be available. Therefore, the bill proposes to repeal the sports blackout rules insofar as they apply to events taking place in publicly financed venues and/or involve a publicly financed local sports team. In the end, this Television Consumer Freedom Act is about giving the consumer more choices when watching television. It's time for us to help shift the landscape to benefit television consumers. Now, I know the broadcasters and cable companies are likely to suggest that the government should not micromanage how they offer their product to customers and that bundling can promote diverse offerings. What those interests fail to mention is that the government has already entered the marketplace and conferred certain rights and privileges like a compulsory license, network non-duplication, syndicated exclusivity, and retransmission consent, which stack the deck in favor of everyone but the American consumer. I hope the introduction of this act furthers the debate on issues like a la carte channel selection, and I look forward to the channel's consideration of the bill.